Love it. So I want to kick off with a story because I think that it's good for the people here to have context about how we met Neal. And I don't know if you remember, but 3 years ago, when I was running an influencer marketing agency, we wanted to build the influencer software. I read this book, this amazing book. I have it here with me called, the Zoom is blurring it out, but it's called The Age of Influence, written by none other than Mr. Neal Schaffer over here. So I read the book and I was super impressed, very inspired to, and the book really informed a lot of the things that were inside the software in the early days. So like our relationship first approach, the fact that it enables a lot of different types of partnerships and so on. So the book was an inspiration for a lot of the things we built inside of the software. And I was very excited. So I reached out to Neal 6 months into it saying, hey, Neal, we built this software inspired by your book. Why don't you take a look? And then I had no hopes of him getting back to me because Neal's been in the digital marketing. I've watched his keynotes from before. Obviously, I read his book. And I was like, okay, this guy's not going to respond to me. But then Neal actually responded to me. And then he took a look at the software, was able to share some early feedback. He also teaches a course at UCLA. So he was able to give it to his students. And then his students were able to share feedback with me. So a lot of Saral actually was inspired by Neal's work, both directly through his feedback and indirectly through his book and through his students. So I just wanted to say that and thank you, Neal, for all the support that you showed back in the early days and throughout the journey so far. And I'm really glad that you're here with all of us today to share a little bit of your wisdom with the 30, 35 people that we have on the webinar today. So yeah, thank you and welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. I'm quite honored by those words. So, but I mean, Yash, you went from an agency and you built a tool out of scratch,
Yeah.
and here we are. You've created this great tool, great company, lots of customers, global.
Yes.
From your headquarters in India. So, congrats on all that you've accomplished as well.
Yes. Well, thank you, Neal. Appreciate it. Couldn't have done it without partners like you. So love it. Let's dive in, right? I think the first, because I shared the book already, it's called The Age of Influence. So how did you name, because I'm sure naming a book is such a big thing. Why did you, and I'm sure there was a deep reason behind why you named it that. Why did you call it The Age of Influence? What do you really mean by that? Because the title of this webinar is also, how do you build a brand in the age of influence? We all know what a brand is, but can you define and add a little bit more color to what you mean by the age of influence? And what was the age before this? How have things changed? Can you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, so to put the book in its context, it was published back in 2020, pretty much when COVID started, if you remember, Yash. So things have progressed since then. But originally, the book was really, if you remember the pre-COVID days, this is right before TikTok emerged, when Instagram was still king. Influencers really ruled the algorithms, ruled the timelines. It was very, very hard, and it still is. Situation really hasn't gotten much better for brands, but it's really hard to generate word of mouth and really be heard in social media. So the book actually, for those that might remember, if any of my fans are on this call, it was originally called The Business of Influence. And I actually did a pre-order campaign, and it had a different looking cover, which was The Business of Influence, which I wanted people to think of, influencers and business. It wasn't just some random cultural phenomenon that influencers could be leveraged for business means. And it was my publisher, HarperCollins, who said, you know what, we did a survey and we decided that the age of influence has a better chance of selling more books. So in all honesty, that is how the title came about. Either way, I think it really means the same thing, that we really need to think about online media a little bit differently. And, fast forward, I published this book, Behind Me Digital Threads, in October of last year. And, fast forward to where influence marketing is today. Yes, there's still things that your business needs. You still need an online presence. You still need to do SEO. You still need to do email marketing, right? But when it comes to social media, I think we're still in this age of influence. And the influence used to be based more on follower count. Today, we know the influence is really based on the content quality, right? More than the follower count, that the views that content generates, regardless if you have a lot or few followers. So that's how far we progressed. But I think that the tenets of the book, being the age of influence, I don't think that's changed. And my advice to businesses really is we need to collaborate more, not just with influencers, now with content creators, right? We changed the language a little bit in 2025.
Yeah.
But really, I believe that social media, and I wrote about it 5 years ago and I wrote about it last year, it should really be a place to collaborate with other individuals. And I think that's where you're going to find the greatest value.
Love it. Love to see it and hear about it. So what does that, how do brands go about adapting to this age of influence? Are there any mistakes you're seeing them making that they're still not adapting to it? Or how do they go about building a brand for this? How do they go about playing this new game that has happened? Some people might be thinking, well, it was way easier back then. Like in 2015, you could just crank up some Facebook ads. You basically needed no social following and you could just get cheap clicks and, make millions and millions of dollars. But now people don't want that. Like you said, like it's trust-based selling. It is, you want to have as much exposure as possible, both organically and via ads. So how do you go about sort of playing this new game of influencers? Because it's a phase shift in the world of marketing.
Yeah, I think it really begins with a mindset. I'm actually speaking at an event on in a few days about the relationship between user-generated content and social media marketing and influence marketing, right? So I think that the first step is the mindset that says if you want to succeed as a brand in social media, right? We still have other parts of digital marketing, but in where people spend the most time online, if you want to succeed, you need to become a content creator. And that there's just no other way around it with the way that the algorithms work today. You can try to buy as many followers as you want, but the algorithms are not going to share your content unless it is truly offering value to people. And brands are just not wired to do that. The DNA of someone in marketing is to promote, to sell, right? Whereas the content creator thinks very, very differently. They think of adding value, of being relevant, of building community. And this is the same thing that brands need to do, but it's really, really hard to do. Unless maybe if you're a small business and the business owner themselves are very active on social media, or you happen to have a real savvy social media person in your marketing team, there are some outliers, obviously. I think of a brand like Duolingo, right, who have done amazing on TikTok, offering that sort of, in their case, it's an entertainment value. But that's what it requires. And I think that for most businesses, it's really, really hard to do. So what can you do? Well, this is where we talk about leveraging the content of others. So I would begin actually looking at leveraging user-generated content. And there's a chapter on this in Digital Threads where basically a quote of mine is, the thought that companies have to produce all of their own content for social media, I think is just wrong. I don't think you have to do it. And I think in many ways, if you're just, promoting yourself to other people, you miss out on the opportunities of developing those relationships. And when I talk about developing relationships, let's forget about influencers now, right? Who is it that already has some, what I call brand affinity? I talk about this in the age of influence, customers, employees, partners, fans, followers, mentioners. Who is it that already has some like, know, and trust with your organization that might already be talking about you in social media? And that's really where we begin. The concept of if there are people talking about us in social media, we can, with permission, start to tap into their content and promote it on our channels because indirectly that's going to help promote us as well. This is the core, concept of user-generated content. But, the difference between me promoting myself and a third person talking about me, like Yash, when you started this presentation, you began by talking how much the book influenced you. Now, I could have stood here and said, The Age of Influence is best-selling, award-winning. It's launched businesses around the world, but psychologically, it pales in comparison to someone else talking about me. We call that social proof, right? So really what we're trying to do in social media is start to begin that journey in the age of influence by tapping into social proof and tapping into what others are saying about us and really beginning from there. And it's a long journey from there, but this is where we begin to develop these relationships with people that are in our brand affinity circle that are already on social media, hopefully talking about us. And if they're not talking about us, what can we do to get them to talk about us? That would absolutely be where I start today.
Yeah, I definitely want to dive into the second part of what can we do to get them to talk about us. But I want to emphasize again for everyone else here, I think um, just the framing of looking at influence and not influencer is very important because, like Neal said, it could be you just have to find brand affinity networks. So that those could be teammates, those could be partners, those could be influencers, or those could be customers. There's so many of these channels that you can tap into. You don't have to necessarily focus just on like that big popular influencer that everybody wants, right? Like you'd be surprised how much impact somebody with 5 or 8 or 10,000 followers can have on your company as opposed to somebody with 100,000 followers. So I think I really like that you emphasize that point. Okay, talk to us about the second thing. How do we, let's say I want to work with influencers. I understand, okay, we're living in an age of influence. Maybe me as a brand owner, I have zero followers. I have to start from scratch. It's going to take me 5 years to get to 10,000 followers. So it's smarter for me to go and work with 10, 15, 2 dozen people who already have followings of 10,000 people built up. So how do I go about doing that? How do I attract these influencers so that they can promote my products? What do I do from here?
Yeah, so I actually wrote digital threads as a response to a lot of companies that reach out to me after writing The Age of Influence, because as they had the same mindset of, we want to get going with influencers, we're going to reach out to, people with 10, 50, 100,000 followers. And if you look at it on the flip side, if you're not properly ready, if your brand doesn't have enough social proof, if not enough people are talking about you, if you don't have enough followers, what's going to happen is that these big influencers are just not going to want to work with you. They also have a reputation, and without social proof, it's going to be very, very hard to create those relationships, which is why beginning with the user generated content, beginning with having content from other people talking about you and building a follower base and a fan base from there, that's actually going to help when you reach out to people that you don't know, right? With influencer marketing. But Yash, I think, we've seen that brands back in the old days really began with, the more followers, the better. But in this age of, some call it recommended media, some call it interest media, where it's really not based on follower count, but content quality and the views they get in the algorithm, that follower count may not be necessarily that important. In fact, if we were to move, let's say we're a startup and we have no customers, we have no way of generating user generated content. This is where we go to the next step and say, hey, who are content creators out there? They might be nano influencers, which we would say are like 1 to 10,000 followers. I would absolutely start small and work my way up. Find people who are passionate about what you do, who might give your product a chance. And this is where we get into, a strategy that is still tried and true when we work with influencers that aren't making a lot of money from brands, is influencer gifting, right? Is saying, hey, love your work. We'd love to send you some free product. If you love it, we'd love, for you to talk about it on social. If not, we'd love your feedback, right? Of how we can improve our product. And that influencer gifting, I believe once you go outside of your brand affinity, that is definitely the next step, is can we generate word of mouth through getting our product into the hands of people. And I've had so many, Yash, over the years, so many, small business owners and entrepreneurs and CEOs say, if only they would try our product. If only I could get it into their hands and they tried it, I know they'd love it. So if you're that confident about your product, you could spend $100 on Facebook ads, or you could actually ship that product out to content creators who have a decent following, who talk about what your product, the industry you're in, and start the conversations and obviously the generation of content there. So that to me is sort of step two.
Yeah, I love that. I think gifting is also a really good way because we like to say it's the least risky way of kicking off influencer marketing, because a lot of the times brands buy into this allure of, hey, I want to work with a creator with 50,000 followers, and then they're going to charge $3,000 for an Instagram reel, and then very likely it's not going to work for you. And in like 8 times out of 10, it does not really even break even. And in that case, you just lost $3,000. But on the other hand, if you could just set aside even $1,000, a $500 budget, and send 10, 15, 20 free products out to 20 different influencers and see what they say. Worst case, you get some really good feedback about your product, in which case you got to go back to the drawing board, improve the product. Best case, everybody posts about you. You have enjoy an increased level of awareness and some sales in the market. So I think gifting is a really good way. But I recall from your looking at your book now that there was some like 16 or so ways that you shared, which were quite detailed and innovative. I won't ask you to dive into all 16 right now, because and this will be a 3 hour long show. But then you said gifting already, but what are some other top sort of beginner friendly ways of, well, affiliate is definitely something we recommend, but then from your perspective, what are some of the 2 to 3 more ways that brands can use to work and incentivize these creators to post about them?
Yeah, so I also wanted to add two more things about
Yep.
gifting.
Yep.
Number one, you need to do this with influencers of smaller following sizes, because the more followers an influencer has, the more they're going to charge, the less they're going to say, oh, I'll do it for free, right? Because basically, a content creator influencer's time is money. And I think you need to respect that. So not everybody, you might might think your product's awesome, but
Hmm.
if someone has 50,000 followers and they're used to making a lot of money from brands,
Yeah.
they're not going to work just for free products. So you need to
Yep.
understand that's why strategically you want to find the next generation of influencers. You want to find them when they still don't have that many followers, where they might be, they might be more open to working with you. And the other thing is, the more valuable your product is, so let's take cosmetics. I could have like a $10 hand cream, or I could have a $100 stem cell eye moisture cream. They're going to be received very, very differently because of the perceived value,
Hmm.
right? So something to consider. If you
Hmm.
don't have that value of a product like under $10,
Yeah.
once again, it's going to be a little bit harder than if you had a product that's valued at 50, 100, or $200. So just things to keep in mind when
Yep.
we begin this journey. But going forward, Yash, you made a great point, and I would say that this is sort of another tried and tested type of way of working. Is okay. They have the free product. Maybe they start talking about it, and naturally they go, "Hey, I've already generated sales from this. Is there any way that I might be able to get some sort of commission?" Right?
Hmm.
And this is where we talk about affiliate marketing, which would be the next step, is to set this up. And I know a lot of small businesses don't necessarily have an affiliate marketing system set up, but if you are e-commerce and you work with a Shopify or a big commerce, it's very, very easy actually to get these things set up to be able to facilitate the sending of discount codes. I know that Saral, your software, also provides this as well, which is awesome. So that really is the next step, which is saying, hey, if we're able to sell a lot of this, based on how you help, we want to give you a commission. And this is where you don't want to give out like a 5% or a 3%. I think you really want to be generous, because the idea is, you really want them to talk about your product, and the more revenue they see coming in, the more they are going to talk about it, right? So if there's no incentive, or hey, get a 5% off coupon, when if they go to your website they can get a 10% off coupon,
Yeah.
there's really no value. So you really want to give something generous, make it easy for that influencer content creator to promote you, and hopefully, yes, you'll make more sales and they'll make more money as well. So that's absolutely the next step. And if you're in B2B, I know influencer marketing is as relevant for B2B as it is for B2C. Make sure that you have some sort of system in place where you can say, hey, that lead was generated from that person, and if this closes, we're going to give them whatever commission. But yeah, putting a little bit of skin in the game is definitely a great way to further deepen that relationship.
Yeah, 100%. This reminds me of, I think I don't know who it was, but it was like I was watching a billionaire interview, and then the interviewer asked him, this is a little bit unrelated to influencers, but I'm trying to make a point. He said, the interviewer asked him, what's the one key advice you would give if somebody wants to become a billionaire? And he said, well, just make all of your partners millionaires, right? So it kind of illustrates the point that, hey, don't try to hold back from your partners. If you want this to work, make sure that they're being compensated for their work as much as you can, as much as your margins allow for it. And one of the best things about influencer marketing, as opposed to a lot of other channels, is you can literally reverse engineer your cost of acquisition, or like if you're doing affiliate, right? Because you can just say, hey, I'm offering a 20% commission. That's a 5x ROAS. Right? You can reverse engineer your ROAS with influencer marketing or with affiliate marketing. So that's very, very interesting. Is I find that if you're already spending on Facebook and you're getting a 2x, 2.5x ROAS hardly, why not just work with influencers, give them a 20% commission and get a 5x ROAS on that ad spend? And you only spend on the ads when the sale actually comes through. So it's a win-win for both parties. So yeah, I think affiliate marketing combined with the power of influencers is really, really great from a lot of these angles, both from a partnership perspective, and you're ensuring that other people are enriching themselves, and making sure that your costs and your marketing efficiency is taken care of. So yeah.
Yeah, and might be a lot of people watching this that say, "Hey, I can just do Facebook ads, right?" And
Yeah.
the problem, I mean, we all love paid media. It is what it is.
Yep.
It can provide value when done right. But on the other hand, it doesn't really get people talking about your product.
Yeah.
You look at, and I know not everybody here has products that are targeting Gen Z, but Gen Z will go to TikTok and see if there's any user-generated content. Is anybody mentioning your brand, right? The ads are not coming up. So you have to remember that the ads, they are a way of getting yourself in front of people, but they are not really a fix to the problem. They are a component of, a modern digital marketing infrastructure, but so is influencer marketing. They just work in very, very different ways. Influencer content lives on, the relationships live on. And I think, Yash, you probably want to ask Neal, well, what would be the next thing that you do? And today I would say, well, you have people with brand affinity talking about you. You've gifted other people. You're developing relationships. You've reached out to nano influencers. Maybe you have some affiliate relationships going on. For me, the next thing is really to bring everyone together into your own brand community, a community of whether you call them brand ambassadors. There's a lot of different terminology for it, but I've seen since COVID, and I talk about this a lot in the age of influence, and I have a case study in Digital Threads. I'm part of the Adobe Express ambassador community, and I actually use that as a case study. But when you bring all these people together, you can really scale your program, right? You can have monthly Zoom calls. You can have a dedicated website. You can offer challenges that say, hey, this month we want to promote this product, or whatever it is, and really strategically start to generate a lot more value from all these people that are already talking about you, right? So the community approach, I think, is valuable among many friends. Part of it really is just getting feedback, because these are people that are members of communities that really understand the value of your products. They understand your competitors. So there's a tremendous amount of feedback that you can get, but just from an efficiency's sake, I know, having to deal with 30, 40, 50 people one by one is very, very difficult. And that's why with a community, you can really leverage everyone together and let your the content creators, the influencers talking, let them get to know each other as well. You become the center of the conversation. I think this is how you move from this campaign-based and sort of transactional approach to more of a community approach, where the ROI of this is that inevitably people will start organically, naturally talking about you as you build a better and better community. And if you can bring people together like Adobe does, fly people in from around the world to Los Angeles or Miami. I know not every brand can do that, but whatever you can do, whether it's sending out, swag that is just for community members or whatever it is, you want these people on their social media profile to say that they are proudly brand ambassador of X brand, which is ideally your brand. So I think that's really, what I would recommend. And I think where, every big brand these days seems to be doing just what I'm talking about.
100%. We're seeing that even with brands on Saral, they're almost doing it in 3 layers, and we kind of naturally just spoke about them in that order. The first is always seeding, where you're just trying to build a relationship, see if the other person likes you, you like them, and so on. Then you're going to make it a little bit formal, incentivize them a little bit more with affiliate commissions, maybe discounts for their audience, special products, and maybe recurring monthly products for them, and so on. So you have a middle layer with ambassadors. And at the very top, you have this community layer where it's a special, unique group, which is, maybe invite only, and you're doing all these special things. At the very extreme end, maybe there are some brands that are renting Airbnbs and then just having 30 creators spend 3 days there, and they all just make content together, right? That's the very extreme. Not everybody can do that, like you said. So at the very least, you could have them in a common Instagram chat or a WhatsApp group or a Facebook group, and then just post helpful resources, enable collaborations, and eventually let your brand take the backseat, and then let them just collaborate based on their shared values and mission. And the brand just is kind of an excuse for them to be there, right? So I think that's a really good model. Yeah.
And then you see, an important KPI that emerges from this is the number of the pieces of user-generated content that are out there on social media, right? How many pieces were generated today, last week, last month? Yeah. And that becomes a very, very important metric to see, is this working or not? Because ideally, you may not want to go 100% UGC with your organic social media. It's something that I recommend to all my clients. But for every time someone talks about you and they give you permission to use their content on your social media, that's one less piece of content you need to create, right? So this is where I say, instead of investing your time into learning how to create, reels on Canva or Adobe Express, use that time to invest in relationships with these content creators and others. And that, I think, is going to give you a much greater ROI over time, and begin this inciting this word of mouth, which really is what social media was all about. So yeah, Yash, I gave it in that order intentionally because
Yeah.
I do believe there is an order of things in order to
Yeah.
be most efficient and get the biggest value. And if you try to build a community with big influencers when you're a nobody and you haven't gone through those steps,
Mm.
you're going to be really challenged. So I talk about this in digital threads as well. There's an order of things for search engine
Mm.
optimization. There's an order of things for email marketing and for influencer marketing as well. That there
Mm.
is a logical order. So
Yeah.
wherever you are on that spectrum, if you're already working with influencers, how can we convert that into a community? If you're working with some, but you haven't really found the right influencers, you haven't really found impact, well, maybe you need to find new influencers to work with, right? So I'll be interested to hear, Yash, what questions we might have.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think in many ways, Yash, influencer marketing has become a little bit simplified and streamlined. It's still very, very hard. You
Yeah.
know, identifying the right people. They're humans. They have things going on.
Yep.
Developing relationships isn't that easy.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's really where these things we talked about is really where I would focus efforts on today in 2025.
Yep, love that. I think that was a very, very good breakdown. We have a few questions here in the chat. Keep them coming, folks. We'll take them towards the end of this meeting. But I want to jump to maybe, let's say now somebody's running a brand, they're maybe a marketer or they're the CMO, and they realize the importance of this. They're like, okay, in 2025, I want to go ahead, kick off my influencer channel. How do you where do you pull budget from? Because this isn't a very common channel. Like paid media is a very common channel. Email marketing, very common channel. Like people just naturally tend to do these things. Influencer marketing is a decision. You have to understand the value, and it's a longer term commitment. It's not a channel you can validate in a month or maybe even in 2 months and then say, hey, it's ROI positive, let's just do it, right? It's kind of like SEO. Like it takes 6 months, 12 months of effort for it to really give you that value. So how do you start pulling in budget for this? What's the lowest risk way of doing this? And what do you measure to prove ROI internally at your companies? Let's get a little bit more tactical.
Yeah, so I want to ask you, when you decided to invest in ChatGPT, where did you pull the budget from, right? When you first invested in a social media dashboard, where did you pull the budget from? So I think with every new technology, new marketing channel, money, when you see the ROI of it, you make money available. And obviously with social media, I think that there were companies, maybe they pulled budget from SEO when that first emerged. And then they pulled money from organic social media or from Google ads to do Facebook ads.
Mm.
So I think it's going to be a similar process. And really, yes, there are tools like Saral that require like a monthly SaaS tools, but
Yep.
it really comes down to, the way I see it is, are you outsourcing content creation to agencies? Do
Mm.
you have marketers that are spending half their day on Canva creating social media content? And that to me is really the first step and that's why I began with user generated content, because, well, if we're doing photo shoots every month and spending a few $1,000s to create our organic content for the editorial calendar for the month,
Yeah.
can we replace that with, or part of that with user generated content would absolutely be the smartest way to start. And when I present on Friday, I have a little spreadsheet up, right?
Yep.
It's like, the cost to create all this different content in-house, the
Mm.
cost we're spending with agencies or outsourcing,
Mm.
and then the cost if we work with content creators and influencers, what does that look like? So
Nice.
so begin with cost.
Yeah.
And I think that's just going to be an easier way to sort of go in. And yeah, you're going to start, like I said, look at people with brand affinity. Have you already been mentioned, tagged in posts before?
Mm.
Do you have employees that have talked about you, followers that have talked about you, right?
Mm.
And maybe you can't begin with branded content. Maybe, like I said, you don't have people talking about you yet, but can you start with non-branded content, right? Like your customers that are following you, are they creating content that's like, you know what? It's not about our brand, but we can still post it because it'll still generate demand for the lifestyle we want to promote.
Yeah.
And it'll begin this relationship, right?
Yeah.
Of reaching out to that content creator. Oh, we love the fact that your customer love your content. We'd love to share your latest post on our socials. And I think most people are really flattered that a brand would want to share their content. And I think the data shows that most people will not only, approve of it, but the publishing of user-generated content will get others saying, oh my gosh, maybe I'll publish something, and they'll pick it up as well. So that would be the easiest, real low-cost way of getting started.
Yeah, love it. Awesome. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And then, like you said, that there is an order of operations, right? So you don't even need that much but you don't need $10,000 a month. to start this. Yeah, you could start with as little as 500 a month or 1,000 a month. It just send some free products, see where it goes, build those relationships, and then take it from there. And how do you, maybe my second question to this that naturally will come up is, let's say it has been 3 months or 6 months. How are we supposed to measure this? There's always brands come to us and there's always this dichotomy of sales versus awareness. Like, hey, we're getting all these people to post about us, but there's no sales, or there are some sales, but it's not really picking up. Like how do you go about measuring this? Do you measure different things? That is there an order of operations in terms of measurement as well? How do you think about measurement and just ROI of influencers?
Yeah, it's really funny, Yash. I remember the early days of social media when I had a specific meeting with a CEO locally here in Southern California, and he's like, I don't see the ROI of any of this Facebook stuff. And I
Yeah.
said, well, what's the ROI of like your magazine articles, your newspaper articles? Are
Yeah.
they 100% trackable? Because they're not. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously you can put in discount codes, what have you, but at least in a digital space, things are trackable.
Yeah.
So I would start with, well, what is the ROI of your organic social?
Mm,
Right? What's the
mm,
what is the value of an impression in social media?
mm.
How much does it cost to create a piece of content? What's the ROI of creating that? So I think if we start there, and we do live in an age where most brands are creating organic social media content, it
Yeah.
becomes a logical sort of jumping off point. I think 3 to 6 months down the road, ideally, if you're able to reduce the amount of content that you need to create, and with the user generated content, you actually see an increase in engagement, in impressions, in followers. I think you've already won part of the battle, which is to show, okay, when we invest in this from an organic perspective, it really does work. But I think from there, it might start anecdotally, but this is where if you have an affiliate relationship in place, you can start to say, okay, this is the amount of, influencer generated leads, influencer
Mm.
generated website visits, or in fact, it could really start with just the Google Analytics of traffic from social media, right?
Yeah.
Of that it generated, more visits, more shopping carts, more conversions. But you
Mm.
got to remember that some of this is that people are going to see it in social media, and then they're going to type it in directly
Mm.
to a browser. So we also have to remember that there is this dark social aspect that, maybe we didn't see a direct correlation with the social media analytics, but when there was more user generated content published, did we see more, more direct hits to our website, right? Or when we look at keyword, talking SEO, when we look
Yeah.
at tools that measure the keyword volume for your brand, did that
Yeah.
increase as well? So
Mm.
there are a few other things we can see that down the road will lead to increased sales.
Yeah.
But can we correlate this activity with this, activity that we've been doing with influencers, really
Yeah.
to get to the point where you start seeing major sales? I think that's the in-between point
Yeah.
where, is it a leap of faith? Is it investment in time?
Mm.
Is it based on some data that says, hey, we can correlate this to show that there is definite positive movement here? For
Mm.
me, it's a necessary investment, right? It's
Mm.
like brand building on its own. You need brand awareness to
Yeah.
get people to know about your brand. You can't have every post be about buy this, here's a sale, promotion. So you need a
Yeah.
balance, and really working with influencers is a type of brand building in
Yeah.
the age of influence.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I like that you shared that. It reminds me of a story back in my agency days. We were working with the skincare brand. And what we did, so they were kind of just kicking off. I think they raised a small round and they were just like kicking off their marketing activity, kind of doubling down on a lot of channels. So they started with us for influencer marketing. And then a couple of weeks later, they started with like a PPC agency for their Google ads. And then we set up their program. In 3 months. We had some 70 or 74 creators just posting consistently about the brand. It was great, but there were no attributable sales. And then we had like a quarterly check-in meeting with them, and they told us, hey, we got to cancel our contract. We can't really work with you because I love the UGC. It's not really affecting my bottom line. Versus if I look at my ROI on my Google ads with my PPC agency, that's crushing it. That's like been like never been better, just like loving it there. And I tried to explain to her that, hey, that is because of the increased level of awareness that the UGC is causing, which is leading to the cost per click on your Google ads going down. She didn't buy that. She was like, this doesn't fit the mathematics really. And then they just went ahead and canceled with us. Turns out 2 months later, they reach out because all the influencers stop posting about them. The CAC on Google ads start going up. And then they realize, well, this guy was right. Like it's all the awareness from the influencers that's causing, like you said, people aren't necessarily on social media to buy, right? Like they're knowing about the product, they're learning. And then a week later, when the need arises, they're Googling the brand because they have that recall. and they're clicking on a Google ad, or they're clicking on your organic search result, and they're buying from you, right? So it's hard to track, but then you have to look at some of these other signals, like, hey, is my CAC on my other channels going down? Or is my
Yeah,
CPM on Facebook decreasing? Yeah.
yeah, no, I have my thoughts about PPC agencies. And, as someone who does, I run ads as well.
Hmm.
Ask your PPC agency, and I'm sure that agency was similar, that they will advertise your brand name on Google, right?
Yeah.
So let's say, I have digital threads. So if I advertise digital threads, that would organically, I would have come out number one.
Hmm.
But agencies, PPC agencies do this because it's going to be the cheapest, easiest thing to convert.
Correct.
If you didn't have the pay-per-click ad, you probably still would have converted organically.
Yeah.
But in some ways it's insurance to make sure you convert, but
Yeah.
it also converts very, very well, right?
Yeah.
When you take out the branded keywords and you just look at non-branded keywords, I would have asked that agency, hey, how are the non-branded keywords when people weren't talking about your brand? How did those convert? Because those are a lot harder to convert, right? So like Amazon ads, I do really well. If someone mentions Neal Schaffer, digital threads, age of influence, of course it's going to convert really well. But what about if someone mentions influencer marketing, digital marketing? And this is where working with influencers and the user generated content, it's going to help raise that brand awareness so that when people do see your ad, right, through the pay-per-click or the Facebook ad because of retargeting, what have you, that it is going to impact positively the click-through rate and the conversion rate. So that's a great story, Yash. And it's really based on, it's based on the scientific proof that people are, it's omni-channel marketing. People are seeing you in a number of places where they are converting the final click. Do you attribute 100% of it there, or do you share it where it should be shared to get a better view of the attribution of all your spend? So yeah, you should be doing pay-per-click. You should be doing Facebook ads. You should be doing influence marketing. You should be doing all those, but they're all going to convert differently, and they all actually work together in many ways, like you mentioned.
Correct. Yeah, I think like the traditional marketing funnel of awareness, then acquisition, retention, I think that's a little bit, it's not true. Like you said, I think before the call we were speaking with, it's a flywheel now. It's no longer a funnel necessarily. And there's maybe like mini funnels in between, but there's so many things happening. People are learning about it on TikTok, then researching on Google, and then buying on Amazon. Like there's no way you could track that, right? Unless you literally have spyware on somebody's device, like, which is illegal. So let's not do that. But then the way to track that is look at the bottom line, look at the numbers, like look at site traffic. Is organic site traffic increasing? Are you getting more clicks on your ads and things like that? So there's these indirect ways to measure it. I think somebody here, Christiana in the chat, gave a really good survey, really good suggestion is a post-purchase survey. It's another good way to measure it, right? Because you could add in a post-purchase survey and say, hey, where did you hear about us? And then they can say, hey, Instagram, influencer, TikTok, whatever. And then they can, that's the realest data that you can have, right? Because it's directly coming from the consumer. So yeah, I love that. And then maybe one more.
Yeah, hey, Yash, I remember one other thing I want to throw out because it's something that often doesn't get talked about. But when we take this user-generated content perspective on influencer marketing, I've been to events where CMOs of consumer brands have gone on stage and say, yes, we work with influencers, but we source content from them only for our Facebook ads because they convert way better. So you got to remember that the content that influencers, content creators creates is better than your content in most cases. Meaning not only is it better for your organic social, it's better for your paid ads. It's better for your web copy. It's better for like your shopping cart images that you can, when you source it properly with permission and with contracts, that you should be using this content everywhere because it's going, it's going to lift up all the boats in the ocean. So that's another, ROI that I think a lot of marketers forget about. And another reason why the closer you get to 100% UGC, this is what people want to see, right? When we go to Amazon to buy something, we immediately want to look at the photos that customers are posting, right? I mentioned people going to TikTok looking for, how are people using the product? What does it look like on people? So that's really where the UGC just becomes, and once again, it's embedded in like deep psychological theories of social proof and other things that just, it has so much more value. So that's why this user-generated content perspective, I think is going to give you a lot of ROI rather than just thinking of, I want to collaborate with someone with 50,000 followers so that they can mention us once. The ROI is fundamentally different.
Yep, I love that. I love that. Awesome. I want to get to some audience questions. I have some audience questions here in my notes that people have sent while they registered. There's a few interesting ones in the chat that I might we might take first. So I think Jeff here asks, what's the best way to engage influencers to start a conversation about a partnership involving your products where they would be compensated? So while this reminds me of your, I think there was like a flow chart in your Age of Influence book about like look at signals and then like
Yeah.
do outreach. Can you maybe talk about? I think that'll be a very good answer to this question.
Yeah. So, it's all about like, know, and trust.
Yeah.
So, if anyone here has experience with sales, it's the difference between sending a cold email and asking for a referral from a trusted relationship.
Yeah.
So if you're going in cold, imagine, if you're directly contacting this influencer, they're probably getting pitched by a lot of people. I shared this in my latest newsletter. I have a podcast, your digital marketing coach. I've already had close to 100 people reach out to me to be a guest on a podcast this year for a podcast that only interviews 25 people over the course of 12 months, right?
Yeah.
So it's very, very easy for companies. I mean, kudos to you, Yash. It's really easy for companies to invest in your platform and be able to, send these outreach messages. But the problem is the other side is a lot of them are just going to get ignored, right? So you need to build a relationship before you reach out to them. It's going to help you convert all the better. And how do you do that? Well, social media is a great way to start that relationship. Are you following this person? Have you liked their content? Have you commented on their content? And really, you're trying to build top of mind in a genuine and authentic way so that when you do reach out, right? When you comment a few times, then maybe the fifth comment, maybe the 10th comment, maybe after a few weeks, you go, hey, we're an upcoming brand and we'd love to work with you. Please see your DM for my message. That approach is going to be a lot more successful and I believe a lot more authentic as well, in sort of just, the cold email out of the blue without them and you saying how you love them. Well, if you love them, why aren't you following them and engaging with their content? So this is where we get into the sending the social signals and really slowly developing that relationship over the course of, at least a few weeks. I know we're all in a hurry. We don't want to wait a few months, which is fine, but I would begin there and really, we have the term slide into the DM, which we would often use for, trying to attract someone of the opposite sex or in some cases the same sex, but trying to find an intimate partner. But, what we're talking about here is we're trying to develop a more intimate relationship and we can do it all through social media just by investing a little bit of time. And that's absolutely where I would start the relationship, because then instead of trying to use ChatGPT to personalize an outreach message, you already know about them, right? You will be able to personalize that just based on the content that you've seen, the comments that you've gone back and forth. And you go from there. That to me is the easiest no-brainer, approach. But 99% of marketers are lazy. They just want to take an automated approach. They want to contact 200 people at scale, and they don't go through the effort to really value the relationships with those individual people.
Yep, love it. I think, building the relationship, researching well, reaching out with a very particular message to those creators, maybe even warming them up a little bit through comments before you reach out, like Neal said, is a great way to go about it, Jeff. So hopefully that answers your question. Feel free to drop in more questions, but I've got some here in my notes.
And Jeff, I would also add, hey, I don't know if you work with brands. We work with, influencers in a variety of ways. Would you be open for a conversation to discuss opportunities, right? Like I would keep it there. There's two approaches. There's an open-ended approach, and then there's hey, we have a campaign going. We need to get 10 influencers. We're going to pay you $50 or whatever it is. I much prefer the open-ended to say, hey, how do you work with brands, right? Would love to have a short conversation to see if we might be able to work together. And that is how you take it from the DM to an actual offline Zoom call or phone call, and you go from there.
Yeah, I like to call it a soft call to action versus a hard call to action. I don't say, hey, well, this is our budget. Like a lot of brands, because we onboard people and we see that they say, hey, we've got a $500 budget and we need 3 reels and 2 videos. And this is the campaign brief and blah, blah, blah. And that's the first time they're hearing about you. Like they don't even want to know all of that. Just, maybe offer to send them a free product, see if they're open to working, see if they're even taking in new collaborations. Because any good influencers is already going to have dozens of brands in their lineup, like that they're already promoting, and then a few on the wait list. So you got to build that, go that extra mile, build that relationship, so they're able to prioritize your brand over everybody else's. Makes complete sense. There's another interesting question in terms of the collaboration types that we spoke of. So this is from Maud. I don't know if Maud is here in the audience today, but the question is, which are the more effective collaboration types? Is it should we do gifted or should we do paid collaborations? And this is interesting because we spoke about gifted, we spoke about affiliate, we didn't really talk or touch upon a lot of the paid nature of partnerships. Obviously, the best way to start is gifted or seeding and that sort of affiliate relationships. How do you go about? Do you eventually end up suggesting brands that they do paid relationships? How do you think about paid relationships and the ROI on that, and how do you measure the risk reward of that?
Yeah, so I think that the cadence is going to be key here because if you are working with influencers that have brand affinity and then you start to reach out to nano influencers and you gift them and you start having affiliate relationships, is that enough to generate this flywheel? Is that enough to generate the activity that shows the ROI of doing this? And are you ready to scale to the next level, right? So ideally, if you have a community of these people, you could have paid collaborations inside that community where at least these people already know your brand, they already perform, and therefore, yes, if you were to give them a little bit more of an incentive, could they create more for you? So that is one type of paid challenges inside of communities that you can definitely do. But if you feel that you're not reaching your potential, and obviously when you have a community, I would offer them referral bonuses. Like if you can refer other influencers to our community, friends of yours or other content creators that you can invest in the community to build the community as well. But let's say, there's just no one else you can think of to invite in the community. You've gone through all the gifting, you need to reach a new level and you've already seen the value and you have a little bit of budget. Okay, now we can go into, are there influencers of bigger sizes or that have more perceived influence, or we're just out of our budget when we reach out to them, we wanted to give them a free gift and they wanted $500 to post, right? That's where we begin to look at this traditional influencer marketing of basically pay to play. And I think this really comes down to, if you've already built this community, which I advise you to do, would this person fit well in this community? Like, ask your community members. Another ROI is give me the names of 3 creators we should be reaching out to, or 3 creators who you follow, right? So instead of, and no offense to a tool like Saral, because you should be using the Saral tool to help identify these influencers as well, but you could combine that with human vetting from your community members and really be very selective as to who you reach out to, because now we do get into the ROI question of spending a few $100s or a few $1,000s. And this is really where the influencer identification is going to make or break your ROI. So you want to make sure that yes, you're using Saral. Yes, you're sort of using your community members, but you're also literally vetting their content. Is there a cultural fit with their content? Does their vibe match the vibe of your brand? Are they already talking a lot about your competitors? In which case they might have an exclusive contract with them. They might not be able to talk with you, right? So I think that there's a lot of consideration that needs to go into it, which is why that's almost like the final part of, if we go in the order of things, of paid relationships with people that don't have any brand affinity and that will not, accept gifted product. You really want to be careful so that you make the right investment. And I'd say at a minimum, if this person were to create content for us, could we feature on our website? Could we feature in our ads? And if the answer is yes, right, then that's going to be the ROI. I mean, yes, you'll get additional ROI, but think of the ROI in terms of that content that's created. Will it blow away anything else that any of our other, influencers are creating? And if the answer is yes, then it might very well be worth that additional investment.
Yeah, love that. I think that's a really good perspective, and especially if you're using a platform like Saral, you don't even have to ask the creator. You can just go in. The point is to not get rid of the manual work. The point is to enhance it with data and analytics. So in Saral, it'll actually show you all of these things. It'll show you like, here are the top 5 creators that this creator has collaborated with in the past. Here are the other 10 brands that they promote. So you can go see if they're promoting a competitor or some sort of a brand that does not match your values at all. And then you can reach out more intelligently saying, hey, I saw that you already collaborate with these 3 creators. Why don't you add them to our community and we'll set them up with some bonuses similar to yours and things like that. So I think very interesting. I think Krishan here asks a good follow-up on this community topic. Krishan from Obvi, best way to communicate with the community. Should we create a Slack channel, Facebook group? I see a lot of brands doing Instagram chats, WhatsApp chats. What's your sort of, I think it like really comes down to preference, but have you seen anything work better than the others? There's also platforms like circle.so and School that you could use. What do you recommend?
Yeah, that's a really good question. In fact, one of the brand ambassador communities that I'm in, they use a third-party platform, and it's not ideal, right? In fact, there's not going to be an ideal platform. So let me just throw that out there. But also, I would actually ask your members, like,
Hmm.
hey, we're looking to get together. We want to have a dedicated, message board where we can post opportunities. We want to have like monthly Zoom calls or whatever it is. We have different options. So Facebook group is definitely one option, right? If it's a younger audience, Discord might be an option. I don't know. I'm not a fan of Discord, but I know a lot of people are.
Yeah.
And then Slack is obviously an option. Instagram DMs, as you mentioned, WhatsApp.
Yeah.
And then we get into those third-party platforms like Mighty Network, Circle, School. And I think it's really going to come down to the members, like what, and ask them if they might be part of other communities, right? Like
Yes.
what would you, the idea is that you want to use something that people would want to use.
Hmm.
So if you're like a huge fan of Discord, but no one else in the community is, they're just not going to use it and you're not going to
Yeah.
get any value. So you need to really, go with the, what that post-purchase survey. Hey, how'd you find out about us?
Hmm.
Same thing. Have a natural conversation. Start with, the 5 or 10 people that are most active, that you think are the biggest fans. Start by asking them, having the conversation. We're going to
Hmm.
start a community. What platform would you recommend? In many ways, Facebook, I know a lot of people have a love and hate relationship with it, but
Hmm.
most people are on it and most people do log on a daily basis. So,
Yeah.
the Facebook group still can work, but if everybody is on Slack, then, that might be a good way as well. But I think the choice of platform is not as important as getting the feedback and making sure that people
Hmm.
actually log in regularly to the whatever platform you choose.
Correct. 100%. I think one
And Yash,
other,
maybe
yeah.
this is the next, maybe
Yeah.
Saral 2.0, you'll have to develop your own community platform. So
It's in
I
the
think there is a
works.
need, right?
It is in the works. Yes.
There you go.
It's on a
I
roadmap
should
for
have
later
known.
this year. Yeah, it is actually.
Nice.
So yeah, but I think one of the best things about Krishan, maybe from my end, a little bit of advice is what I've seen work best is anything that's more like Neal said, anything that's natural to the influencers. So usually I see a lot of like if it's a smaller community, maybe a dozen or so people, Instagram chat is really good. If it gets any bigger, then chat gets really messy. So then platforms like Slack or WhatsApp or like a more dedicated chat app is really good. But then maybe kick off with an Instagram community, like a common chat group, and then scale from there into WhatsApp or Facebook. I would say avoid Slack or one of these like work platforms because they tend to feel like work. And you want to give this sort of like homely, community friendly feeling to the group. So make sure that they're on maybe like a little bit of Facebook or WhatsApp, which is more personal to people. And you get to have their like contact info. You can always give them a call. It's more personal like that. So that's a little bit on me. I know we're almost at the top of the hour. There are a few other questions, but I'll keep them reserved for next time. We can conclude the show. I think there has been already a lot of value that has been shared by Neal here. So thank you, Neal, for hopping on and sharing all of this. If anyone's interested in learning more, check out the Age of Influence. Highly recommend. I've like highlighted and bookmarked a lot of the book, and I just reread the book last weekend in preparation for this show. And then definitely go check out the new book, Digital Threads. At the very least, go check out Neal's website. He has a great podcast that I listen to. Very, very curated, very good resources from the basics to the advanced strategic stuff. He's got you covered. So anything digital marketing, go check Neal out. We'll send you his website and some resources over email. But Neal, any final words?
No, I think, it's time to stop asking questions and start to develop relationships, right?
Yep.
Invest in people, invest in relationships, and that's really the best advice that I could give. And if you only took one thing away from this hour-long webinar, it's really that is don't be shy, right? Reach out to people and start developing those relationships that will generate value, down the road for your brand.
Yep. Love it. Awesome. Thank you, Neal, for taking the time early in the morning and sharing all your insights with the group. If you could, by the way, send us that Excel sheet for everybody who's stayed on live towards the end. I want to incentivize them. So if you could, the talk you mentioned that you're going to give, if it's available, if you could send me that Excel sheet of the comparison between the costs of doing creative in-house versus doing it using creators later on, just send it to me over email, and then we'll send an email to everybody who
Yeah, you
stayed
know
on
what?
live.
I'm gonna share my screen. I'll just flash it on the screen if you
Oh,
give
okay.
me permission.
Yes. Give me one sec. So everybody who stays yeah, you can share. You have access.
Give
Everybody
me
who stayed
one.
to the end can take a look at this.
There we go.
Perfect.
So this is it. Very simple, right? All of your content costs, traditional media, social content, organic or ad, if it's a photo, if it's a video, there's going to be two different costs for this, right? Traditional media, this is basic banner ad type of thing. Social content for a story is going to be a different price. And then your web content, I'm sorry, traditional media is like newspaper, magazine, web content, display ads, photos, videos. How much does it cost in-house? How much does it cost to outsource it? And then what is the UGC cost? If you are giving away product, if you're gifting product, then the UGC cost is basically going to be the cost of product plus shipping, right? There's not going to be any other cost associated with that. If you end up paying someone a few $100s, well, if an agency, you're paying several $1,000s, right? Maybe you have the budget to work with paid collaborations to sort of accelerate this. But this is really, do the math. And I think you might be pleasantly surprised by how much money you're spending to create content. And also when it's in-house, this is the hours of the marketer. What is the marketer's annual salary or monthly salary plus benefits, which is normally double the actual salary? Are they spending, 1 day a week? Are they spending 10% of their salary on this? That is a lot of money, right? From a CEO perspective. So this is another thing you can do to try to, articulate the ROI of, and I say UGC, obviously, this, whether it's generated with influencers, by employees, by customers, that we are able to leverage and source this content and leverage it as our own. And that's really the key thing here. So hopefully this helps out.
Yes, this is really great. Thank you for sharing. And I hope that everybody who stayed to the very end of the webinar and gave us 1 full hour of their time of the day, I found this really, really helpful. So yeah, we'll send you all the recording of this clip of this webinar. So in case you want to share it internally with your groups or on your social medias, feel free to do that. And then, yeah, we'll keep you posted. We keep doing these roughly bi-weekly. So there will be a new webinar with an equally amazing guest, just as Neal. But Neal, you've been great. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Yash, and thank you all for joining and,
yes.
Holding out to the end here. So hope you had some value, and feel free to reach out. I'm sure Yash will follow up, or I'll follow up as well. And if you have any further questions, let's continue the conversation.
Love it. All righty. Okay, Neal, thank you. A lot of thank yous in here in the chat. So looks like this was great. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.